Today we are chatting to Eva Klein, who is a mother of three and also a certified infant and sleep consultant, and she's the founder of My Sleeping Baby. So welcome, Eva.
Thanks so
Uh,
much for having me.
very excited to have you here. And I guess the first question is what inspired you to become a sleep consultant?
Yeah, the short answer is my second child. So basically, I happen to be a lawyer by training, which I know is quite an interesting pivot. So I finished law school. I gave birth to my first baby, who was one of those babies that, quite frankly, made me look good. You know, those kids that make everybody go, "Oh my gosh, you must be the best mom ever." And you're like, "I know, I know, thanks." And so, it got to our heads, my husband and I's heads. And then 2 years and 4 months later, I give birth to her younger sister. And this baby made me go, oh, that's what everyone's talking about when they're talking about a baby who cries nonstop, who needs to be held 24/7, who wakes every hour on the hour. I did not know what people were talking about. And so this baby, unlike her older sister, had a very different temperament. She was a much harder baby to, care for. And so naturally, sleep was not something that came so naturally to her. And she was about 4 months old, and she was waking me every 90 minutes all night long. I remember that so clearly. I remember just talking to my mom on the phone and telling her that I feel so tired that I feel like I'm going to die.
Mhm.
That's how I felt, like just bone tired. And so I had no choice but to open up the sleep books and figure out what was going on. Because with my first, I didn't read one book. Well, I was reading lots of books. They were law school textbooks because I was studying for my finals and writing my finals 9 months pregnant. This time around, I actually had to open up sleep, like baby sleep books, and figure out how to fix the situation. I managed on my own to make the situation a little bit better, which, by the way, was short-lived. But in that temporary phase where I was getting 3 to 4 hour stretches, I remember I said to my husband, I said, hey, you know what? I've got another 6-7 months of maternity leave left. Here in Canada, we get 12 months. Well, now they just extended it to possibly 18 months. But at the time, it was 12 months that I was able to take. And so I figured, hey, why don't I use up the rest of this time off to get my certification to become a sleep consultant and launch a side business? Not planning on quitting law or anything, because, who does that? But it was just supposed to be a side hustle, some fun side money. I get a new client, I go buy a pair of shoes. That was supposed to be it. And then the business ended up growing a lot more quickly than I ever imagined. I forgot to mention that while I was getting trained, my baby regressed because, again, I didn't know what I was doing yet. I had just started the training process to become a professional myself. And so I hired my teacher to help me with my baby's sleep. And to this day, it was the best money that I had ever spent. It was $750 US. I am Canadian, right? So just like you
Aussie dollar.
Australians, that
Yeah.
conversion is it was a killer. But to this day, I haven't looked back. My husband would still say that it was the best money that we spent as parents, being able to get our sanity back. And so when I launched my side business, it grew a lot more quickly than I ever imagined it would. And so when I got to that fork in the road and I had to choose between my business and my job, I chose my business, thinking, hey, you know what? I still have my law degree. I still have my license. I can always go back and, practice if it doesn't work out. But spoiler alert, I haven't looked back, doing this full time for about 5.5, 6 years now.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, it's just, it's so necessary. I think there's a fact, like I read, that you can actually survive on no food and no water longer than what you can survive on no sleep. So, it's a much
I believe that.
yeah, yeah. But, and I guess, I know one of the questions that I know a lot of, my clients and followers and friends ask, what is the best time to hire a sleep consultant? Because some ladies, there's just this fear that I'm going to bring this newborn home from hospital, it's not going to sleep, or, have I got to the point where I've actually failed as a mother? So what is your advice on, the best time to actually, even consult with a sleep consultant?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. So I would say a good chunk of parents reach out to me when their babies are in the 4 to 6 month mark, because in that age range, you no longer have a newborn on your hands, right? You now have an infant who does not need to be waking every hour on the hour anymore. Though, spoiler alert, most newborns don't need to be doing that either, but we'll talk about that next. As an infant, you don't need to be waking up all night long with them anymore. You can be getting some really nice stretches of sleep. Most of the time we can get babies in this age range down to just eating once a night, breastfeeding or bottle feeding babies. It's all the same, right? And so when parents know that their little one is old enough to learn how to sleep independently and fall asleep without tons of assistance, and learn how to keep themselves asleep without the parent constantly intervening, that's when they usually reach out. Now, that being said, I will say that the real answer to your question is to reach out for help when you are ready. In other words, the sky is not going to fall if your little one is now 4 months and maybe you're nursing your little one to sleep and you don't mind it. And it's working for you, and you're getting the sleep that you need, and your baby's getting the sleep that he or she needs, and everything is fine. You don't have to reach out and change things up if something is working. You can always wait until your little one is a little bit older or a lot older. But when is the earliest you can reach out for the purposes of getting yourself humongous, massive stretches of sleep at nighttime? It would be that age range. Now, I do also want to mention that I help moms of newborns all the time, because a lot of people think that when it comes to the newborn stage, that it's just one big massive gong show, and that it's this uncontrollable sleep deprived disaster, and that you should just be counting down the days until your little one is 4 months and then have your sleep consultant on speed dial. Doesn't have to be that way. So let me tell you, my youngest, my baby, is now almost 2. I have a newborn coaching program that was born from inspiration that came from this baby. Because when this baby was 5 weeks old, he gave me his first 8-hour stretch of sleep at nighttime. And yes, he was breastfed. I feel like I always have to mention that. Like, no, he wasn't bottle fed, exclusively breastfed baby. And that stretch never went away. It only got longer from there. And so my audience members, when I posted about it, were going, oh my gosh, I want to learn. How do I get my newborn to sleep 8 hours straight? And now, don't get me wrong. There's no guarantee, there's no black and white guarantee that I can give people about what your newborns are able to do, but there is lots of what I like to call sleep shaping, or foundational changes that you can make to your little one's routine, their daytime, their sleep environment, their schedule, that can really help maximize sleep in the grand scheme of things. And so if you want to reach out, 5-6 weeks after you've given birth, I can definitely help you at that point as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think, it's twofold. I think a lot of women, and we're very good at women, at just grinning and bearing it and going, this is just a part of motherhood. My 5 hours sleep is the new 8, and it's just going to be like this for the next decade until my child sleeps.
5 hours interrupted.
Yeah, interrupted.
5 hours interrupted.
Yeah, not a deep sleep. And then it's like, well, actually, and then this whole, after having 3 kids, I used to be, one of the common questions that I used to ask myself, and I know a lot of ladies ask, is like newborn naps. Should I be letting them nap? Should I be waking them to feed? Do you never, there's so many wives' tales. Do you wake a sleeping baby? So that's probably the biggest question. Do you wake a sleeping baby for a feed? And will this then
it's a really
make them wake all the time? Yeah.
Yeah. The answer is yes. It's a balance, right? There is absolutely such thing as a newborn for sleeping too long. And there is also such thing as a newborn not getting enough sleep, right? So I'll tell you, it's very easy. I wouldn't advise allowing a newborn to sleep longer than a 2 to 3 hour period during the day, because we don't want your baby skipping a feed. You see, remember, your goal when you've got a newborn, I mean, your goal when you've got a baby in any age
Can we
range.
just backtrack? Who's had a newborn that's like 2 to 3 hours a day?
What's that?
I've never met anyone who's had a newborn that sleeps for a 3 hour period during the day. I would kill
Oh,
for
I
that.
have.
Really?
I have my newborns. Yeah, I mean this
Wow.
baby number 3, again, who's almost 2. I would wake him up from some of his naps
That's
sometimes.
amazing. See, they're all so different, aren't they? So it's not really black and white approach. It really is.
No,
a tailored
100%.
approach.
But
Yeah.
you know, I will just say that you don't want your little one skipping daytime feeds, right? If your little one is usually eating every 2 to 3 hours, which is pretty typical in that age range, if they don't eat, if they skip over a feed, if they get one less, they slept for a really long period, then guess what? They're going to have to compensate by eating more at night, which you don't want.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, as you said, most ladies contact you around that 2 to 4 month, because I know the big thing is, and I had this with all my 3 babies too, and I hear it through all the mums, is this 4 month sleep regression. So what happens there? Is it teeth? Is it leaps? Is it, what is it?
What it is basically your baby's graduation ceremony from newborn to infancy. That's what has happened. And developmentally, what is happening at this age range is that your little one's sleep patterns are maturing and becoming more adult-like. You see, we adults, we cycle in and out of deep and light sleep. An average adult sleep cycle is about 90 to 100 minutes, where it starts in lighter sleep, we transition into deeper sleep, and then complete it with lighter sleep. Infants are the exact same way, except that their sleep cycles are about 45 minutes. So newborns are not cycling in and out of deep and light sleep. They are sleeping like a newborn. And then when the 4-month mark comes, they go through these huge neurological changes and developments where they are now an infant. They begin cycling in and out of deep and light sleep, but about every 45 minutes or so. And so that can oftentimes lead to a huge regression in the sleep department, because if you have a baby that relies on something external to fall asleep, like feeding, rocking, bouncing, etc., what can happen is that at the end of that 45-minute cycle, when the baby is in very light sleep, one of 2 things is going to happen. Either they're going to put themselves back to sleep and start another sleep cycle, or they're going to wake up. And there is a significantly higher likelihood of them waking up if they did not fall asleep independently to begin with. And so that's ultimately where this regression comes in. Now, the reason why I don't like calling it a regression is because a regression implies that it's this phase that you just have to ride out, and eventually things will go back to the way they were before. For better or for worse, your baby's not going back to being a newborn, right? That's just how the circle of life works. And so it really is a permanent neurological change that's happened, and waiting it out is likely not going to get you anywhere. And so that's when people usually reach out to me, recognizing that helping their baby fall asleep and helping their baby fall back to sleep multiple countless times a night needs to be addressed with some sleep training so that they can be getting some proper stretches of sleep again.
Yeah. And do you think the whole, because I know around this same period, the 4-month mark, is often when a lot of ladies do the whole transition from crib to cot thing. So do you think that's a combination, or is there any hard and fast rule? Like, I mean, all my 3 children went straight to cot because babies are too noisy for me and I couldn't cope with having them in the room. And, you know, the beauty of technology and monitors and stuff. But you know, what are your thoughts on the whole, even transitioning their sleep space? Does that impact them, or is that a good thing, or what tips do you have on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, here in Canada, Health Canada recommends that people keep their little ones, you know, in a bassinet. I don't know if you guys, I know this is like a terminology thing because you guys call it cots, we call them cribs. I totally know what a cot is
Yeah, so
though, but I don't
bassinet's the
know.
little one, the little, yeah, bassinet in
Yeah,
the
do you guys
room,
also call them bassinets?
and then the big one's like the cot.
The cot, okay, or
Yeah.
for us it's the crib. So yes, but
Yeah,
we'll use your cot terminology. So you know, it is typically recommended to keep a baby like usually in a bassinet in the parent's room until the 6-month mark to help with the prevention of SIDS. That being said, you know, I have had clients that have moved their little ones out earlier. Maybe they're a little one, maybe they're a very light sleeper, the parent, and they hear each and every one of the baby's, you know, movements and sounds all night long, and it keeps them up. And so, you know, you obviously need to do what's best for you and use your discretion. But, you know, generally from a safety standpoint, I definitely recommend that people try and keep their little ones in their room until the 6-month mark. But, you know, usually by that age range, it's time for everyone, for the baby to make their way into their own room so that they don't start to realize that, hey, mommy's right there, and start getting distracted by the parent's presence. And then that in and of itself can cause night wakings.
Yeah, really good advice. I mean, I'm a very, very light sleeper, and even, you know, to the point, even when the baby was in, it wasn't even a separate room, it was like a little enclave just off our room, and I had the monitor there, and I would hear every little movement in the monitor still. So yeah, it just depends on your own sanity, exactly, because I guess with the lack of sleep, as you said, you just feel like you are basically dead. Yeah
100%.
So I've got a few questions from some of the members, and I just wanted to go through them. And I guess one of the key ones is, here in Australia, we're about to transition into summer. We're in spring. It's the first day of spring today. And with that, it becomes very light, very early. We have very loud kookaburras that wake everyone up. And it's kind of like, oh my God, the children are going to be up at 4:45, you know, in babies, newborns, toddlers, even my older children. So what's your advice? You know, there's a lot of theories, okay, you need to put them to bed later so they sleep later, and that's never worked for me. What's your advice on the whole early risers?
Yeah. So for that specific scenario, you know, that you're heading into summer and the sun is rising very early and setting very late, you need heavy duty blackout blinds. This is a must. It's so unbelievably crucial, because when you've got all this natural sunlight beaming through your little one's window at the crack of dawn, it's naturally going to wake them up, and it is naturally going to make it significantly harder for them to fall back to sleep, because when we expose ourselves to light when it is nighttime, or when we want it to be considered nighttime, it tells our bodies, our biological clock, that it is time to wake up. And so even if we adults want to be able to go back to sleep, it's going to be significantly more challenging. You know, this is anytime I have a pregnant mom asking me, this is a very common scenario that pregnant moms will tell me. They'll tell me that they'll wake up because they need to go to the bathroom, which is unfortunately an unavoidable side effect of being pregnant, and they'll turn on the lights in the bathroom and then go to the bathroom, do their thing. But then when they get back into bed, they're up for hours. They can't fall back to sleep. And so what I scream from the rooftops is, don't turn on your bathroom lights. Keep the light off, because even though your adult brain knows that 3:00 in the morning is nighttime, your body doesn't understand that. And when you're exposing your body to even artificial light in the middle of the night, it can definitely make it harder to fall back to sleep. Your kids are no different. Your kids, I would argue, are probably even more sensitive than that. And so you want to make sure, for the purposes of them not waking prematurely, that you've got, I would say, 2 layers of blackout blinds. So a blackout curtain, like a curtain with a roller blind of some kind. If I'm using terminology that you guys don't use, just
that makes
stop me
sense.
so I can like redefine what it means. But yeah, I mean, here, what I typically recommend people to use is, yeah, like a roller blind of some kind with a blackout curtain, both of those being blackout. And then that should get you like a 9 out of 10 in terms of, you know, darkness. If you can't get anywhere, or if things are closed, or, you know, if you're in lockdown, garbage bags will do. There is this here in Canada. I mean, I know in the United States, they carry this product as well. There's this really fantastic blackout paper that you can buy that you can just stick like right onto the window. So it's like a level or two up in terms of aesthetics from garbage bags. Like, if garbage bags are going to make your eyes bleed, I get it. I mean, I personally, I'm all about practicality, but I totally can appreciate that lots of people tick differently than me and can't look at garbage bags all day. So
particularly in that brand new nursery that you spent months designing.
Right. No, I had a client once where we talked about like how to quickly black out their little one's room, because, you know, a long-term blackout solution, by the time you get someone to come in and measure the blinds and, you know, et cetera, it can take over a month. And this is pre-COVID. I think the dad was like shooting daggers at me, wanting to throw a tomato at my head, because they had spent like 10 grand decorating, hiring the top designer in Toronto to decorate this nursery, and here I have the nerve to tell them to put garbage bags on the window. That was awkward.
No, I know, but you know what? Desperate times call for desperate measures sometimes.
It is what it is. What am I supposed to do, right? They want to get in, so they wanted to put in, you know, blackout blinds and blackout curtains long term, but that's going to take a month. So garbage bags.
That's great advice, because even I think also I used to travel with special little blackout blinds, because onto the next phase is the whole, you're going away on holiday, and it really isn't a holiday when you're a new mum, because the whole sleep pattern changes for the baby, the whole sleeping environment, the whole wake up times, and then that continues when you get home. So do you have any tips on, you know, trying to make it a holiday a little less, you know, devastating for these mothers and babies? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, gosh, I have to admit, it's a question that I haven't been asked in a while because of this worldwide pandemic that
who's
we're living
going on holiday?
People aren't doing, you know, as much traveling as they usually are, you know, but, you know, nonetheless, what I will say is your goal is to recreate your little one's sleep environment as much as you can. And so if your little one sleeps with a white noise machine, which, by the way, if, you know, the birds are waking you up at the crack of dawn, get yourself a white noise machine, get your kids a white noise machine. That's also huge. And then bring it with you, because that's familiar. So, you know, as you said, if your little one, if you've got blackout blinds in your little one's room, which, as I said, you should, then that's when you're going to want to bring a travel blackout blind of some kind. You know, here, I'm sure, as you said, I'm sure that Australia's got their brands. Here we've got our brands of this. There's this really fantastic product here that it's a blackout, it's a thick, completely opaque blackout curtain that attaches to the window through suction cups. So it's just so easy to put up, and it's so easy to take down. And that would be something that I would invest in. If your little one's got books that you like to read to him, you know, bring those books with you. If he sleeps with, you know, a sleep sack or a lovey, or there's, you know, some kind of like special item that your little one sleeps with, bring that whole kit and caboodle with you, because it's worth it. You know, you want to be able to protect your little one's sleep as much as possible while you're away.
Yeah, that's great advice, because it's, I mean, not that everyone's traveling at the moment, but can it even just be, you know, a night away at the grandparents, or even with the babysitter, or a slight change of environment that, you know, can cause a bit of anxiety for mum, and then the whole sleep pattern thing. Now, moving on from the baby to the toddler sleep patterns, I've got a couple of questions from some ladies about my toddler's waking. They're 2 years old. I guess that some are waking up for a bottle, some are waking up for a pacifier. Is this a crutch? Is this, you know, how torturous is it going to be for me to get rid of this? You know, any advice on that? Yeah.
It's a good question. So the pacifier, for a toddler to wake up and not be able to find his own pacifier, right? That is what I like to call learned helplessness, right? That's the equivalent of like your toddler taking his bell and like, mommy, daddy, I'd like my passy, please, because I can't find it and I can't be bothered to get up and look for it myself. Right. That's basically, you know, what that is. When a toddler is waking up for a bottle, usually, not always, but usually that toddler is relying on the bottle to fall asleep at bedtime. Right. So reverting back to our 4-month sleep regression discussion, this applies to toddlers as well. This applies, this isn't something that babies outgrow. If you have a toddler that is relying on a bottle to fall asleep, there is or to at least get sleepy. Maybe he's not passing out on the bottle, but maybe he's getting very, very sleepy, or maybe he's having it right before he goes to sleep. So there's a clear connection between the two. There is a very high likelihood that at some point in the night, he is going to wake up at the end of a sleep cycle, realize that he's awake, not have the ability to roll over and go back to sleep because he thinks that he needs a bottle to resettle. And then that's where you and the bottle come in. And so the solution there needs to address bedtime and teach your little one how to fall asleep without the bottle, without any kind of crutch, so that he can learn to put himself back to sleep at nighttime. And then, of course, yes, you're going to want to wean him off of it and teach him how to fall back to sleep without it. Is there going to be lots of protest? Most likely, because it's a toddler, and toddlers they're specialists at throwing temper tantrums when they, you know, don't get what they want. And nighttime is no different than daytime. They can throw temper tantrums at night as well. But it doesn't mean that you need to be leaving him alone throughout the entire process. You know, there are definitely more hands-on supportive ways that you can teach your little one how to settle and resettle without those crutches, so that you can still get yourself big results.
That's such great advice. It's been such great tips, because I guess one of the things with the ladies I work with is I always talk about, as a mother, you know, no matter what stage of motherhood you're in, whether that be newborn, toddler, or even teenager, we have this flick that switches, even pregnancy, where you're on this high alert, how you talked about the, you know, keeping the lights dim. And with that becomes, you know, you're on this high alert. So you always hear your baby cry. It's very hard once you're awake to get back to sleep. And with that, you've got these really high cortisol levels and you're running on that adrenaline. And this is also why so many women end up, you know, being overstressed. And with that overstress comes, unfortunately, you end up burning glucose. And with that comes craving, you know, it's just a vicious cycle, and you crave the glucose, you crave the sugar, food, all of that, donuts, all of that. Yeah, and then it becomes this struggle, not that it's all about weight loss postpartum, but a lot of women then I see go into high intensity exercise, which is just another layer to this cortisol level. And then they wonder why I'm so depleted. I'm so depleted. I'm basically dreaming of sleep, and then I'm trying to exercise. I'm trying to, you know, feel better. But just coming back to, as you say, these simple tips that also, I think it's not just about the baby. I think you've got to keep in mind it's about you and for your long-term sanity and wellness.
I know when I was, you know, working with my then teacher, and I got my, you know, then 6-month-old to sleep proper stretches at night, I was finally able to take care of myself. I tried beforehand, you know, tried with a, you know, a lowercase t. I mean, let's be real. Like, how well can you possibly take care of yourself when you're waking up every 3 hours? You know, it's an E for effort type of situation. But, you know, I wasn't able to make some real big lifestyle changes in the name of self-care until I was able to start sleeping, because I didn't have the energy to say, hey, I know that I usually heat up frozen pizza, but I'm going to make a stir fry today. I didn't have the energy to do that or the wherewithal to do that. My body was in survival mode at that stage. And so, yes, to be able to like fill my body with sleep, I then had the ability to say, hey, you know what? Like, I'm going to spend 15 minutes making myself a stir fry because that's a heck of a lot healthier. And I'm going to feel better after I eat that food. And then life will be a heck of a lot more blissful than it will be sleep deprived eating frozen pizza. Mm-hmm. So yes, you matter. Like, you definitely matter, because then you know what happened? My baby had a happier mommy. Yeah. My baby had a happier mommy. And then my baby benefited from me getting her sleeping so that I could sleep and eat healthier food and exercise and feel so much more sane and balanced and whole. My husband was no longer afraid of me. You know, everybody wins. Everybody wins, including you and including your baby. So yeah. I know I did not directly address your question, but I had to go on that tangent.
No, but that's it in a whole, is at the end of the day, it comes back to you. And if you're not functioning, you know, even at 80%, because when when you've got no sleep, you can't even buy the frozen pizza. You're in the grocery store just in a haze going, I don't even know.
I can't even bother. I can't even think. What's the recipe again? You know? What do I put in stir fry?
Yeah, you can't even think. So as you say, you matter, and it comes back to, you know, having the confidence and getting a professional like you to support you through this, which is then just going to be tenfold. And it's going to be
100%. And so I'll tell you what, you know, some of my top sleep tips are to get you off on the right foot. So tip number 1 is look at your little one's sleep environment. So I know that we touched upon this, you know, the blackout blinds, huge, a white noise machine, huge, you know, proper sleep attire. So I'm a huge fan of swaddles for the newborns. I'm a huge fan of sleep sacks for the infants and the toddlers. A lot of people think that, you know, their kid turns 1, they don't need a sleep sack because you can give them the blanket. Don't do it. You can give them a blanket, but the baby will end up on this side of the crib and the blanket will end up on that side of the crib, and then they won't be nearly as comfy and cozy. And so sleep sacks are fantastic. Do you guys call them sleep sacks?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for the sleep sack. Like I was looking for the largest size possible. I want to keep the kid for as long as possible. Was I.
It's actually a lot harder to find toddler and preschooler sleep sacks, which I think sends the wrong message that, well, when your kid turns 12 months or 18 months, I guess that means you don't need one because the stores don't carry them. No, they're lying. Telling you, like, scrounge around the internet, like, to find that 30
they can be found.
Sleep sack. It is worth its weight in gold. I'm telling you, because you know what it specifically helps with? And I just experienced this a couple months ago. It helps prevent your little one from attempting to jump out of the cot.
Well, that was what I was going to say was the main reason why I used to get them. Otherwise, their little toes would shimmy up the cot and they'd try and jump out. And I'd see them on the monitor teetering on the edge, just going, ah! So it was mainly for my little escape artists. And again, it's the temperature control, they're more settled, easy to travel with, you know, all of that stuff you said. It's just a no-brainer. Yeah.
It's so important. Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is prioritize your little one's daytime. So daytime schedules, daytime routines are very, very important. And the main reason is because if your little one is not getting enough daytime sleep, and your little one isn't napping when she needs to be napping, and your little isn't going to bed for the night when she needs to be going to bed for the night, she's going to get overtired. And overtiredness is one of the biggest sleep stealers out there, because what happens is when they don't get enough daytime sleep, which by the way is a requirement for them, it's not an optional luxury like it might be for us adults, it's really very mandatory for them, then they're going to get overtired, and overtiredness causes cortisol to go up. And then when their cortisol is up, it causes all sorts of things that you don't want. First and foremost, causes a huge amount of fussiness, crankiness, you know, that famous witching hour that people refer to, I'd say more than 50% of the time, the witching hour is actually overtiredness. I might have just blown some of your minds by hearing this, right? When you think about, hey, was my little one up for a really long time and now she's losing her mind? That's overtiredness. But on top of that, it makes sleep a potential disaster because it'll make falling asleep significantly more challenging because they're so wired, and it can make staying asleep also significantly more challenging because they're completely wired from this heightened level of cortisol. And so making sure that they are napping when they need to be napping and sleeping when they need to be sleeping is really, really crucial. And so you want to be on top of what is known as their wake windows or wake periods. And that refers to the amount of time that your little one can be up for before he begins to get tired and needs to go back to sleep. So I'll give you some examples. You know, a 6-week-old baby usually cannot be up for longer than 45 to 60 minutes before needing to go back to sleep at any point during the day, including before bedtime. Right? That's a very short, and that includes
it is a short amount of time. And I teach a mums and bubs exercise class, and I always make it a 45-minute class. And I always say to them, these babies are going to be a little alarm clock. Trust me, you'll tell when they've had enough. It is definitely a short period of time. It's 45 to 60. They can't go the 60 mark especially when they're stimulated.
Right. Yeah. Right. But that includes the feed. I just want to specify.
Oh, yes, of course.
That if the feed is part of their wake time. And so if it takes you 30 minutes to nurse your new, you know, fairly new 4, 5, 6-week-old baby, and then 15 minutes later they're getting tired, that's normal. That's normal. So, you know, go with it. So let's contrast that with a 6-month-old. A 6-month-old usually can't be up for longer than 2 to 2.5 hours before having to go back to sleep, which I want to emphasize. We're not talking 3 hours. We're not talking 4 hours. You know, babies in that age range, when they're up for a 3 to 4 hour period, they will be overtired. I can say this with basically 100% certainty that your little one, you know, will be overtired by that point. So are there any other age ranges I should, you know, touch upon to give people examples?
I guess the hardest bit is, you know, when the toddlers start dropping that midday sleep. It's like, oh, what age is it? Do we push through to dinner time? I have to make them drop it. Otherwise, they're going to be up till 10 o'clock at night. So do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's definitely a tough one. I would tell you, if your little one is napping 2 hours and is really struggling to go to bed at bedtime, it might not mean that you need to get rid of the nap cold turkey, but rather just drop the nap down to an hour and a half or drop it down to an hour, you know, cut it back by 30-minute periods of time, because there is a middle ground between a toddler doing well with a 2-hour nap and an earlier bedtime versus a preschooler who doesn't need to be napping at all. And that's usually around the 3 to 3.5 year range. I'd say average. Don't get me wrong. There are ones that drop it a little bit younger than that. And then there are those, you know, 4-year-olds who here, like they go off to, we call it JK, junior kindergarten. And they're like, it's like 3:30 at the end of the school day, and they're like falling asleep on the floor. Like you ask any JK teacher, every year they always have those 1 or 2 kids that clearly still need their nap, or they're at the tail end of their nap days and are just not functioning members of society without it. So those poor moms. So, you know, there's definitely a range, in other words, and it's all within the realm of normal, but the average I'd say is 3 to 3.5 years when they're ready to drop it for real.
Yeah, that's such great advice. Thank you so much, Eva. So just tell us, where can everyone find you?
You can find me at mysleepingbaby.com, and that's where you can find out all about my online coaching program called the Sleep Bible, which basically helps exhausted parents step by step get their little ones sleeping, while I am there supporting them along the way in my members only Facebook group. So you can find out all the information that you need about it on my website. And I should also just mention that if you're looking for more advice on what kind of wake periods or sleep totals or how many naps your little one might need, I have a sleep chart that you can download that's got all my suggested wake periods and sleep totals for babies ages 0 to 5. So it's one of those really handy dandy charts that I recommend printing off and sticking it on your fridge so that you can constantly revert back to it as your little one gets older. So I will send you that link.
Definitely. We'll put that link below. That is just awesome, Eva. So many great tips and so much stuff that I wish I had when I had my little ones trying to navigate this. So really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. This has been fun.